Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, a nationally ranked community-focused bank with over 30 locations throughout Virginia, Northeast Tennessee, and North Carolina. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. What's going on, Hokie Nation? Happy Thursday. We got some breaking news this morning in Blacksburg. We got a big football game to talk about coming up on Saturday as well. It's episode 376 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. How about that? We put that together last summer. A little outdated on some of the names there, but of course, Will did a great job as the head honcho there behind the wheel, and that was certainly a fun project and very fitting because Rutgers is in town this week. We're recording on Thursday, September 19th, 2024 from our high-tech studio at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Remember to like, subscribe, refer the show to a friend, and head over to techsideline.com to check out our extensive editorial content. Subscriptions are just $12 a month for loads of content, and for Virginia Tech students, of course, your subscription is free. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, and we also want to take the opportunity to tell you about our new online poster store. Tech Sideline is offering great wall hangings created from our incredible in-house photography. We've got action shots of the players like Stephen Gosnell's catch against Marshall in Lane Stadium, pageantry shots of the band, skipper, everything else you could think of, and we're adding more posters on a regular basis. Search the web for Tech Sideline posters or check out the link in the YouTube description to visit the store and come back often because we're going to be putting up a plentiful supply of new stuff. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. To my right, Chris Coleman, our lead analyst and columnist. Across the way, the senior staff writer, Mr. Andy Bitter. And in the fourth chair, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart. Nick Brown pushing the buttons, the mustache man with the glasses on today. He's rocking the specs behind the scenes. And guys, we got to start with the breaking news this morning in Blacksburg. May 7th, Metallica finally is coming to town, and they're going to play inside Lane Stadium.
Yeah, I woke up this morning and make breakfast for my daughter and everything, get her lunch ready, and I sit down, I look at my phone, and like 3 minutes ago, Hokie Sports announced that they're coming to Lane Stadium. It's finally happening. It's like, how many years have you heard the rumors? Like, I heard there are 4 hotel rooms at a Holiday Inn that's being booked under the name, that aliases of the band that they have. And so I was like, they're only booking 4 hotel rooms for this giant tour that would be coming in. It's finally happening. People are like, oh, I saw their tour bus in Roanoke one time. It's like, okay, we have cell phones now. Like, somebody would have taken a picture of this if this actually happened. But kind of incredible that it's finally happened. I see on the thing, Metallica announced that, 14 North American cities. We were joking. It's like, it's actually 13 North American cities in one town, because Blacksburg is sort of the odd duck on this list of stuff. But, this has been talked about for, feels like 15, 20 years now. They've been like, when's Metallica finally going to play here? And they're finally coming here. It should be exciting.
I think a lot of people always envisioned it as maybe like they actually play Enter Sandman live rather than an actual concert. But it's cool that it's an actual real concert. That was an early announcement. Like normally you don't see announcements made before.
Well, I
9
guess
a.m.
Metallica announced it at like 6:45
Yeah,
or something
yeah, I
like
guess
that.
so.
So they're
So that
it looks like I'm looking at it now 7:15. So I think Virginia Tech's hands were forced. They're like, well,
that's true.
it's out there. Better announce it here.
I think there are people in this country who don't pay a lick of attention to college sports, but are Metallica fans, and they're like, they're Googling Blacksburg, Virginia right now.
Well, they're about to get some cool YouTube content. That's for sure.
Well, it's like all these big cities on there. Syracuse is on there, and Syracuse, Virginia Tech. You think kind of the same thing. Syracuse is still 140,000 people. Like that's a city, like an actual city. And this is Blacksburg. 40-some thousand, a little bit different coming in here, but obviously there's a very targeted reason why they're coming in here. And I've heard in the past that like to try to get them to perform for like Virginia Tech, I think it would cost like $5 million or something like that. Like it's not a cheap thing, or it'd be pretty difficult to get them to come in here. So I don't know exactly the arrangement of them coming in with a tour like this, or where the money goes, or how that whole thing is allocated. But I'm sure it took a lot of effort and a lot of planning and a lot of negotiating, and they got it done. I mean, credit to whoever was behind this whole thing and getting them to come in here.
Will, what you got in the fourth chair? Metallica's finally coming.
Andy is requesting to talk to somebody at Tech about it, so we're working on that. So my story is I was on the treadmill this morning in my basement and had no clue. Then my buddy Jeff Holland emails me. Jeff played for Tech in the 90s, defensive tackle, and he's a huge Metallica fan. He's been to over 100 of their concerts, if I remember correctly. And he texted me a picture of the tour dates. And I was like, oh, great. So I tweet that sucker out. Then I think to myself, Jeff knows people at Metallica. Did they send him that ahead of time? Should I have done that? What did I just do? So I deleted the tweet, and I told him I deleted the tweet, and he goes, why'd you delete it? And I said, I was just afraid that wasn't supposed to be out there. And he's like, no, Hokie Sports announced it like 20 minutes ago. So
Yeah.
just a little story about being in the media and having a little panic attack.
This is one of those where you look at it, you're like, is this April 1st? Like, I've heard this before. And then, like, no, it's not. And like when it was up on Twitter, I had to double check, triple check. I'm like, okay, before I go forward, put this out there, you want to make sure, because you've heard the rumors so many times over and over, and finally coming to reality here. Yeah, on a Wednesday night, by the way. I'm sure people will complain about that.
Oh yeah,
last day of classes, these students to be studying for exams. The noise in the middle of the week and a weeknight is going to be terrible. Like, you know what? Just rent your house out to an Airbnb or something like that. You'll probably make a mint of people coming in for the concert.
Oh God, yeah.
Do you think that the ticket to this concert, like compare it to a game in the past for Virginia Tech, is this one of the hottest tickets in town in quite some time?
Probably.
I'd have to imagine. I mean, it's sort of I can't imagine they're coming back to Blacksburg after this anytime soon. So it might be sort of a one-time deal. I don't know what the demand is for Metallica tickets. I imagine pretty good if they're still touring. These guys are 60 years old now at this point. They've been touring for a long, long time. So, I think they've got it down, and I think the prices are probably pretty steep on this one.
Looking forward to it. No doubt about it. All right. Well, we got a lot of football to unpack today. That was we had to shove this into the script a little bit with the breaking news this morning. So definitely fun. But we got a big football game on Saturday to talk about. First, though, I want to go to Andy, talk a little bit about the press conference. First and foremost, Jalen Lane, Antoine Powell-Ryland named ACC Players of the Week. Lane had 106 yards on 5 catches. That was in the first quarter. Touchdown as well against Old Dominion. We know what APR did. He had the 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, recovered his own fumble. Andy, what did Coach have to say heading into this Rutgers matchup now that they flipped the script to a new week?
Yeah, I think he was pleased with how they played, while acknowledging that they still didn't play a complete game. I mean, it's, what the fans are sort of up in arms about. It's like, oh, how can you let ODU stick around for a while? It's like, okay, well, it's a football game. It's going to happen sometimes that you don't play perfect from start to finish. But, for 3 of the 4 quarters, they played pretty well, and they put that game away eventually. Doesn't mean that there's not things to look at, like the run defense, which is a huge story coming to this game against Rutgers this week, needs to be better. Start to finish, they need to be better. Red zone, they need to be better on offense. So, I think it's sort of the typical, hey, we liked what we saw last weekend, but areas for improvement. And, this is not a team that's hitting on all cylinders yet. Will they do it this week? We'll find out. I think a lot of people are eager to see that.
Is Tech a little more beat up right now, injury-wise, than we had maybe previously anticipated.
Yeah, and it's some key guys. I think that's the other issue. Xavier Chaplin, Ollie Jennings were in regular uniforms yesterday. It's probably a good sign for them playing on Saturday. Bayshall Tootin in blue. You'd imagine he's going to be in blue for a while this season. I think you protect the franchise at running back in that situation. Stephen Gosnell in blue. Sounds like both of them got some good work. Kelly Lawson also in blue. Didn't get as much work as the other guys, but Pry still expects him to play on Saturday. So a lot of dings, a lot of bumps and bruises. I think if they could change their schedule, they would take one of their open weeks this week. But that's not how it works. They got to go play a game this Saturday. And I think most of these guys will play. Just how effective will they be is the question.
Yeah, I don't think it's the number of injuries than it is more like who's hurt, right? Like Tootin. Like if Tootin is limited in any game this year, I'm not talking just about the Rutgers game, but any game, like what does the offense look like without him in the game? What is the run-pass split and things like that? Because they don't seem nearly as confident in their backup running backs as they are their starter, naturally. But you'd have to imagine that offense would look a lot different without him in the lineup. So keep him on bubble wrap every week for sure.
Well, he was in blue last week.
Right.
So it's not like this is something new. And, he took a hit on it last week and came out with a brace on it in the second half, and then he ran for 2 touchdowns. So it's proven that it's not just debilitating. He can go out there and play with this thing, but you would like your running back to be as fresh as possible going into a game like
Coach
this.
called him a dog, said he wanted to go last week. Some depth chart movement, whether it's injury related or not, most notably Kelvin Gilliam, now a co-starter, but across the entire depth chart, you've had a little bit of movement. You guys want to speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think Caleb Woodson at the wheel, and Kelly Lawson's dinged up. I don't know if that's necessarily injury related, though. I think they just really like Woodson. Whenever Pry talks about him, or Sean Quinn or Chris Marv, they just sort of beam about him when they're talking about him, and the effort he puts in on special teams, and talked about a couple like wow plays that he made on special teams just from effort. And I think that's what they like to see out there so much. So he's inexperienced at that spot, but I think that the way they've talked about him, like, it's not surprising to me that he's in the starting role right now. And I think it might continue even once Lawson is healthy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they seem to be dedicating themselves to a future with him as your starting will linebacker for potentially, the next 3 seasons.
And maybe the Mike long term. I mean, they always
knows?
say that they kind of grow into that role. So who knows?
Yeah. So I agree. I think he's your starter there. To me, this week is going to be interesting because if Lawson's going to be limited, if Jaden McDonald's out for the second straight week, you've only got 3 really experienced linebackers in there. And you've got your starter, Sam Brumfield at Mike, you've got Woodson at will, and you've got Jaden Keller, who's played both. He always likes to rotate 4 players in his linebacker spot. So who was that 4th guy?
It's probably Balance.
Balance.
And he's played both too. He's played Mike and Will.
So I heard earlier this week that they had told him he was going to play against Old Dominion. But then he tweaked his hamstring in practice and couldn't play. And the plan is to play him this weekend if he's healthy.
Well, it sounds like he was set to go to Old Dominion until Tech stepped in at the last second and offered him the opportunity here.
Right.
So kind of probably disappointing for him that he didn't get to play last week in Norfolk. The other thing on the depth chart, you look at that left guard spot where they listed as Laith Ganem or Bob Schick. And that has sort of been the weak spot on the line. You look at the PFF grades, that's been the consistently the lowest graded position of those 5 spots. Ganem, I think, has struggled a little bit. He's still young and making mistakes, and Schick moving over from the right side to the left side. It's about a 2-to-1 timeshare, Ganem with the 2 and Schick getting 1 snap for every 2 snaps Ganem gets. But, we'll see how that breaks down, because I think they're still not quite getting what they like at that left guard spot, so they're trying to find some different options for it.
I wouldn't shock me if they got Brody Meadows snaps there at some point as well.
He's practiced it. He's played there in the past.
Yeah.
And he's played well, to the point that I was kind of surprised that they flipped Schick to the left side. I mean, Meadows missed the second game. He didn't dress for that, so maybe that's part of the reason behind that. But I thought Meadows played well enough to even be a co-starter with Braylon Moore.
Right.
And then they come out this year, and Ganem's the guy, and there was no rotation with Meadows even in the first game there. So a little surprising to me. I feel like they have a guy that's got some good size that can push people off the line. It might be an opportunity for him.
PFF really liked him against Cody.
Yeah, did he? What was his grade? It was like
It's like a 99.7.
yeah. I mean, he played like 12 snaps.
99.9.
Did he play what, like 12 snaps?
snaps,
I mean,
yeah.
that's still impressive. I
Yep.
mean, that's doing everything right. So
Yep. I think that earns more snaps probably if the coaches agree with that.
It should. It should. Well, let's set the table a little bit for everybody here. Virginia Tech and Rutgers inside Lane Stadium, 3:30 p.m. on Saturday. You can watch it on the ACC network. Chris Cotter will be on the call. Virginia Tech opened up, according to ESPN, this is, as 4.5-point favorites. They now currently sit this morning as 3.5-point favorites. The over-under is set at 44.5. And I'll tell you what, though, Andy, a lot of the advanced stats models that I've been looking at, they like Rutgers in this one.
So does everybody on our message boards. It seems like I was reading this week and I'm like, what is going on here? Like, everybody has turned into Bill Paxton from Alien, where they're just like, it's game over, man. It's game over. What are we going to do now? It's like, we're talking about Rutgers here. Like, you're 3-point favorites in this game. It's like, 3-point favorites. We lucky to stay within 3 touchdowns, man. They're going to keep coming at us. It's like, when did Virginia Tech fans turn into Vikings fans? That's what I want to know. This just defeatist attitude where something is always going to go wrong with this whole thing. Like, I can kind of get, as a Vikings fan, I can get it. It's been 6 decades of, they get your hopes up and then they just kick you right in the stomach at a certain point. I haven't even been alive long enough to see the 4 Super Bowl losses. I've only seen the 4 NFC Championship game losses, and those are painful enough. But I don't know, Virginia Tech fans right now are just like talking about Rutgers like this is just this super team coming in. Like, Rutgers is a solid team, and they may well win this game coming in. They have a really good run game, really physical game, but they have not really beaten anybody this year. I mean, Akron and Howard, come on now. Akron has 3 FBS wins the last 3 seasons. Howard's an FCS team. They should have run all over those teams. They've not played behind in a game this year. They've not trailed once. They really haven't had any moments of adversity. Like, great start, but let's see what Rutgers is like in a real game before we start talking about this team coming in. Just like, they're going to push Virginia Tech around. They've got no chance in this game.
I've had this game circled since the schedule was released, because I think Rutgers represents everything that Virginia Tech was kind of bad at last year. What Rutgers is good at, Virginia Tech is bad at stopping. They've got 3 honorable mention all Big Ten offensive linemen. They've got the Big Ten's leading rusher from a year ago. They will pound the football. Their offensive line coach is a 2-time Super Bowl winner and 5-time division winner in the NFL. So they're really well coached in terms of the running game. And Virginia Tech fans have seen the Hokies obviously with some struggles. Like, okay, so if you're, let's say this was Team A versus Team B, and you look at how Rutgers runs the football, and you look at how Virginia Tech has, defended the run against teams like Rutgers, and you take off the orange and maroon hat, and if this was just 2 other normal teams, you'd probably pick the running team, right? The one that's had a lot of success. So I think that's the worry for Tech fans. And the other one is also that it seems like it's going to be a close game. And we know what happens to Virginia Tech, or what has happened to Virginia Tech in close games.
One-score games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think people think back to last year's game too, and they see what the final score was. That game was closer than the final score indicated. Rutgers jumped out to a 21-3 lead. Tech fumbled it on the second play. Rutgers is in the end zone. Well, the national anthem's still playing, basically. It's 7-0 at that point. It's 21-16 after Tech scores early in the 4th quarter. They have a chance to get off the field at 3rd and 1. Rutgers runs motion. Dorian Strong goes with them. Nobody's on the left side of the field. And Manungai goes 55 yards on the easiest touchdown run he'll have. Busted play. But this was a tight game up until that point. If Tech gets a stop on that play, you don't know. And we're talking about Kyron Jones' first start. I think a lot of people are looking at that and go, well, if they beat Virginia Tech that badly last year, what are they going to do to them this year where their run game's even better? But I think Virginia Tech is a much better team than last year. I think they're a better team than what they've shown these first couple of weeks. So I understand where some of this apprehension is about coming into this game, but man, I'm still looking at this. The books still have Tech as a favorite team in this. I know they're at home, so they have a little bit of an advantage in that sense, but a lot of the advanced metrics go into that line that they're making too. So I don't quite understand all the negativity with that. I understand the caution that people are going into this game with, because I think this is one that, like you said, with the run game, if you don't step up to that challenge, it could be an ugly one. But I still think Virginia Tech has a pretty good chance in this game.
Will's been antsy to get into the conversation. Let's send it there.
So to add some depth to what Andy was saying, if you go back and look at the stats from last year's game, Virginia Tech had 18 first downs to 14 for Rutgers. Tech outgained Rutgers by a little bit, 319 to 302. The Hokies ran 71 plays to just 50 for Rutgers. Possession time, Tech had 33-44, and Rutgers had 26-16. What got Tech into trouble was they had 2 turnovers, Rutgers had none, including a drones fumble on the second play of the game that gave Rutgers the ball at the 19. Manungai runs it in. I think it was Manungai. And Rutgers is up 7-0 before a minute's gone. Rutgers had 3 plays of over 20 yards and another one of 19 yards. And 3 of those 4 were touchdowns. Tech had 1 play over 20 yards. So it is the turnovers. Penalties were also favored Rutgers. So yeah, just avoid the big plays for Pete's sake, and you know that's kind of an even matchup. So a couple other things I wanted to add is that, believe it or not, the line is already out. Metallica is favored by 6.5 over the Hokies on May 7th, which I think is ridiculous because you know what Metallica's lineup is going to be, but you don't know who's still going to be here for the Hokies.
Sure.
And to preview our picks, Andy was talking about how people are picking this game. 3 TSL staffers pick Rutgers and 2 of them pick Virginia Tech. So we'll find out who those people are later.
All right. Well, Virginia Tech ranked number 4 in the country in returning production, 84%. We knew that heading into this season. Not far behind them, though, is Rutgers, number 13 in the country, 72% of returning production. Chris had kind of alluded to this a little bit. Greg Schiano assembled quite a veteran team, ton of 4th and 5th year guys, a lot of them from the state of New Jersey as well. That's where their pipeline is. It just makes sense, right? His second stint as the head coach in Piscataway. Rutgers last season, 7-6, went 3-6 in conference play. Had a Pinstripe Bowl win over a Miami team that had opt-outs and what have you. But for what it's worth, they went 2-0 against ACC opponents in 2023 against Virginia Tech and then against Miami. So, yeah, Rutgers off to a 2-0 start like we had mentioned. 44-7 win over Howard. 49-17 win over Akron. But I think the biggest thing is they're coming off a bye. Right. So
I think their biggest thing is, like Andy said, those first 2 teams they played are absolutely terrible. So you really, you can be very vanilla against those teams. And if you really want to do it, you can spend your offseason doing a lot of Virginia Tech prep work. And then you've got the bye week to say, okay, everything we thought about in the offseason with Virginia Tech, what have they shown differently in their first couple of games, and how do we do to adjust that the game plans we've already come up with and things like that. So Rutgers, if they chose to, have been able to focus a lot on Virginia Tech. I'm not talking about just the last couple of weeks. I'm talking about the last months. Whereas Virginia Tech has been, very limited with their prep time of Rutgers.
So it sounds like you're telling me you think Rutgers is going to come out with a triple option on Saturday.
Yeah.
They've been holding this back the whole time.
I don't know about that with this year's quarterback.
It might work. Worked for Vanderbilt in that first game. So no, I would imagine that what you see is what you're going to get with Rutgers. Is sort of a no frills offense. That's just sort of the way they play.
Let's dive into this Rutgers offense a little bit. Second season at Rutgers for offensive coordinator Kirk Sieroka. 30-year coaching veteran, stops at Minnesota, Penn State, Western Michigan, Delaware, Western Connecticut State. So here's a little wrinkle to this. It feels like there's been ties to every single game so far this season for Virginia Tech, and yet another one. Sieroka and Brent Pry were on the same staff at Penn State in 2020.
So was Bowen. Bowen was part of his offensive staff. I can't remember his exact role on that team, but yeah, they're
tight ends, I think.
Yeah, there's a carryover there between the two.
Yeah, and they've coached on the same staff, and they've also coached against each other, because the 3 years before that, 2017 to 2019, he was at Minnesota.
And I think he went back to Minnesota after Penn State.
He did. He's a guy, like his team's offensive numbers have never really jumped off the charts at you, but he's been at Minnesota and Rutgers, where you don't have the most explosive talent in the world. He's a guy who gets the most out of a talent. He understands, that you can't try to do things with personnel that aren't capable of doing it, right? So
I think the way you put it in your article was fit a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly. That's a much better way.
I think the Penn State fans might have a different explanation of his skills as an offensive coordinator.
I think they would, but that was 2020, where everybody that changed coordinators and didn't get a spring practice to install a brand new scheme, I think that made things difficult for everybody, including Virginia Tech with Justin Hamilton. I mean, Virginia Tech fans should know as well as anybody how difficult that year was for new coordinators installing a new scheme. But yeah, this guy's been good his entire career. Last year was not his best year, but he also had a quarterback who completed less than 50% of his passes for his career. That quarterback's gone. Now he's got one of his own guys. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes things. Like last year, Rutgers won 3 football games when they didn't throw for 100 yards. 2 of those, they didn't even throw for 50 yards. That includes Virginia Tech. So Gavin Wimsatt was their quarterback last year, and they won that game 35-16, and that's with Wimsatt going 7 of 16 for 46 yards. That's like the most high school box score you'll ever see. This year they've got a guy who's not great, but he's miles ahead of Wimsatt in the passing games. There should be more balance. So that's going to make Rutgers different than last year. So when if you get them in 3rd and 6, whereas last year it was almost an automatic punt on 3rd and 6, now they have a better chance to keep drives going and things like that.
So Wimsatt transfers out. He goes to Kentucky, where he's currently not playing.
Correct.
At Kentucky. So interesting how all that shakes out.
Maybe you should. Kentucky's offense is not doing so hot. Granted, they
Fair.
played Georgia last week and they almost beat them.
Well,
but
they scored more against Georgia than they did at South Carolina.
true. So improvement
Both games
there.
at home, too.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough. Sometimes the grass is not always greener, but he's been replaced by former Minnesota starter, Ethan Kaliakmanis, pardon me. Taroka coached him at Minnesota and was, in all likelihood, his lead recruiter. Now, we don't know that for sure.
I didn't look it up, but yeah, they know each other
definitely
very well.
Could have been. Not the same running threat that Wimsatt was. He's had 87 yards on the ground and a touchdown so far, but definitely a better passer, which is kind of the big thing. You take a look at some of their breakdowns. In their careers, Wimsatt has thrown for less than 3,000 yards, 18 picks to 14 touchdowns. Kaliakmanis, over 3,000 yards, 23 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. Just a little bit stronger throwing the football.
Definitely stronger throwing the football, and I don't think he's an elite quarterback or a great quarterback or anything like that. I think he's above average. I think he's a guy who, when the running game's strong, will play well, but I don't think he's necessarily a guy, if you're down 14-3 and you need to start slinging the ball around, is a guy who's necessarily going to go out there and throw for 250 or 300 yards. So I think the start to this game for both teams is critical because neither team on paper. I know Virginia Tech did come back against Vanderbilt, but that's not a risk you want to run very often. I don't think either team on paper is the type of team that's going to play well behind. So the start in this game is critical.
Yeah, and you give Rutgers a lead, and all of a sudden that run game becomes a lot more effective, and they don't have to go to the air. And it's run, and then they hit you with a big pass or something like that. They might try to do that anyway with their offense, but it's more effective when they have the lead and they know they can just kind of grind things out and churn clock like that.
Well, you guys had mentioned that Kyle Monungai is spearheading this Rutgers offense at tailback, led the Big Ten in rushing last season, had a lot of yards, right? Ran for over 1,000 yards, 1,262 to be exact. Had only 8 touchdowns. 3 of them came against Virginia Tech. His 3 biggest games against the Hokies averaged 8.9 yards a carry. Had a big game against Ohio State, ran for over 150, and then another big one in the bowl game against Miami, ran for over 160 yards.
His line against Tech was interesting. Like he's a guy who's very capable of carrying it between 20 and 30 times in a game. He does that a lot. He's done that twice so far this year. Only 16 carries against Tech last year. I think in hindsight, Rutgers was probably thinking, man, we probably should have gotten that guy 20 to 25 touches because 8.9 yards per carry is pretty good. Against Miami, 25 carries, 163 yards. Now here's the big one. Ohio State, 24 carries, 159 yards. That's against a really good defense. This guy is a top-notch running back. He's not just some guy playing in a running system who happens to have good numbers because of that. He's run the ball well against some good teams, and he's, as far as I'm concerned, the best running back Virginia Tech will face this year.
Yeah, and I think everything they do is geared around getting him the ball. Mm-hmm. Like he is the focal point of this offense, and like Price said, they get north-south quickly. It doesn't seem like there's a lot. He said there's no nonsense in this offense. It's hand the ball to this guy, run behind his pads, and if you're the Virginia Tech defense, this is a big boy game. You got to come with some pads, some pad level, and hit somebody. You can't kind of, we're going to cover them and stuff like that. It's like, no, you got to get up there and you got to hit them and you got to match their physicality. So I think you've seen that at times this year by the Hokies, but this is not one where you take a half off and you'll be in the game or miss a quarter. I mean, that's crucial. If you just if they have a second quarter like they did against ODU, I feel like that's going to be a really bad thing coming up on Saturday.
So far this season, Kyle Monangai has 378 yards on the ground, 4 touchdowns, averaging 8.1 yards a carry, and he had a 27 carry, 208 yard, 3 touchdown performance against Akron. That was before the bye week in their second win of the season. He mentioned it, Chris, 20 or more carries on 6 different occasions last year. Only had 16 last year against Virginia Tech, though. How many times do you think he gets the ball Saturday? What would you set your line? Over, under 23?
I mean, I think it should be over.
Sure.
If I'm coaching Rutgers, it'd be over. Unless Virginia Tech comes out hot offensively and jumps up and plays with a 2-score lead most of the game, I would expect it to be over that, I would think.
Well, they have some other tailbacks as well, right? He can't get the ball every single time. Samuel Brown, the 5th, he's a veteran. Missed the Akron game with an injury. Bye week possibly gives him the opportunity to heal up. We're not entirely sure. True freshman Antoine Raymond, he looks solid as the backup so far. He has 2 touchdowns on the year, a little bit over 100 yards in 2 games. And one of those 2 will be the backup on Saturday, so those are the guys to look out for.
Yeah, not sure which one yet. A guy like Raymond, who's a true freshman, you would expect there to be some pass protection issues. So if you can get him, maybe you blitz a little bit more when he's in the game. But then again, I doubt Rutgers will throw it that often when he's in the game.
What you got, Will?
Nerd alert. So Chris was talking about Monangai running 16 times last year. They ran 50 plays, so that was 32% of their plays. On the season, they ran 811 plays. He ran 242 times, which is 29%.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
makes sense that he ran 16 times against the Hokies.
It was a weird game.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, they had the short field right away. They had the long touchdown they scored on the 55-yarder. I mean, it's just the score got out of hand, not based on the equal number of plays on both sides there. So kind of a strange game, I thought.
It was a strange game. I watched Monangai highlights from last year earlier this week, and that 55-yarder wasn't actually included in his highlights because it was such an easy play. Because there was literally nobody there.
It was such an incredible bust on the defense. How can you have nobody on one side of the field on the most critical down? Just sort of underscores the defensive problems that Tech had early last year with stopping big plays in the run. But I mean, that's they do a pretty good job play to play of getting the guy on the ground and not giving up stuff. But then it's okay, there's the 55-yarder. Or last week, there's the 65-yard touchdown from the quarterback where they, just leave this huge lane open and the guy is gone. So it's it's all or nothing. It feels like with this Virginia Tech defense sometimes. That's the concerning part about it. But man, if they lock up those things that, play to play, they seem to do pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it takes a good offensive line to run the football. Rutgers has just that. They're number 1 in the country in PFF run blocking and pass blocking as far as the grading goes through 2 games so far this season. Ton of experience. Chris had alluded to it. 3 all Big Ten honorable mention guys on the O-line. 2-time Super Bowl champion in Pat Flaherty. Flaherty, there you go, as their offensive line coach. And you just go through the snap counts here, and every guy has over 500 snaps except one.
Yeah, and you've got 2,300, 1,400, 1,200 from left tackle to center, and all 3 of those guys, they're smart. They line up all 3 of their all Big Ten guys right next to each other. So that left side of the line, which obviously Tech had some alignment issues there on that play last year. But I want to say that all 3 of his big runs came down the left-hand side last year against Virginia Tech. I know at least 2 of them did.
The two of the touchdowns did. I think the last one started up the middle, and then he stepped out of a tackle and kept going into the end zone. Right.
So that's really what I think where you want to watch is when Rutgers has the ball, see what's going on the left-hand side of the line of scrimmage, because that's where their strength is on the offensive line.
Is this Tech's toughest matchup of the entire season as far as Tech's run defense against the rushing attack of Rutgers?
I think the toughest matchup of the season is probably at Miami, just because the talent level of Miami, the explosiveness of...
Or Clemson.
Clemson.
Bury Clemson at this point. They've looked pretty good since that opener.
They have. They certainly have. So I think besides those 2 games... in any game where the talent level is relatively even, I think it's the biggest matchup issue. If you throw out Miami and Clemson and that they have more talent than Virginia Tech, this is the biggest X's and O's matchup issue, style of play matchup issue.
I think it's the biggest physical test.
Yeah.
Clemson will be there too. I think Miami as well. BC is like that, although maybe that's not the first thing that pops in your head this year with how shifty Castellanos is in the backfield. Maybe Georgia Tech has showed certainly offensively that they can be a real physical team, but I think both sides of the ball just sort of Shiano has built this team in his mold, and this is what they do. Like we're Northeast, we're tough, we're gonna get after you. I mean, kind of sounds like Frank Beamer teams back in the day. Quite honestly, I mean, like tough nosed defense, blue collar, run the ball. I mean, this kind of sounds like how Frank Beamer built this thing.
This is going to be like playing a 97 or 98 Virginia Tech team, one that doesn't have a first round quarterback like Michael Vick or Jim Druckenmiller, and that doesn't have like an Antonio Freeman or an Andre Davis on the outside. So they're not great at quarterback. I don't think they're great at wide receiver, although it's hard to tell because they don't throw it all that much. But they will pound you on the ground, and they'll play solid, well-coached defense on the other side of it. So it's sort of like a 97 or a 98 Virginia Tech team, a good, solid team that will smack you in the mouth, but probably lacks that extra punch from being like a national contender. And then Virginia Tech got that extra punch the next year in Michael Vick. But if you take off Michael Vick, then it's similar to what this Rutgers team is.
Stylistically, I don't think it's of that caliber.
I don't. Well,
I think that 98 team was like a regular, healthy, competent quarterback away from being really good. I don't think Rutgers is like that. As much as we're talking about up Rutgers, like they've never won more than 3 Big Ten games in a season. Right. I realize they play had played in the tougher division. Big Ten, they still have divisions. I think done with divisions at this point. They used to play in the tougher division.
Remember,
you get Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, legends and leaders, that whole thing. So, we're talking up Rutgers. Still best record here is 7-6. Now, granted, the Hokies' best record in a while is 7-6 too. So that's why I think we're talking about 2 fairly even programs here, which is why I was surprised of like everybody, the doomsday scenario, everybody talking about Rutgers coming into this game.
Let's touch on some of these wide receivers, though, that they haven't been used a whole ton for Rutgers. Dymere Miller really stands out to me. A senior, he was a finalist for the Walter Payton Award. That honors the most outstanding player in the FCS. He played at Monmouth, had 90 catches last year. That was second in the country, and is 1,293 yards, ranked top of the football championship subdivision.
Yeah, so like similar. Another way Rutgers is similar to Virginia Tech. Even when they hit the transfer portal, look, they go after a guy from Monmouth, an in-state school. I don't know if he's actually from New Jersey. But
is that where Monmouth is? I would have had no clue.
It's in New Jersey. Yeah.
Those Jersey folks, it's something different up there.
Jersey's
regionality. They are very true to their New Jersey roots.
They certainly are.
Sopranos pride there, I guess.
Great prolific career at Monmouth. How that translates to the FBS level, we'll see. You can't really talk about it the first 2 weeks because they didn't play anybody. He'll get his first test this week against Virginia Tech. We talk about Virginia Tech getting, its first real test. Well, this Rutgers passing game is going to get its first test this week. We don't know how good it is. We don't know how improved it is. I'm sure it's better than it was last year when Wimsatt was their quarterback. But how much better is it? I think Rutgers fans are probably asking themselves that question, and they're going to find out this week. So both teams are going to find out something about themselves.
How about their huge true freshman, KJ Duff? He's 6'6", 219, number 1 recruit in the state of New York last season. And he's a 4-star that they got on the outside.
Yeah, and 6'6", 219. If Rutgers gets the ball in the red zone and they don't give it to Monangai, which would probably be a mistake, then I would expect the ball to maybe go in his direction in the corner.
He's got a touchdown already this season through 2 games. Chris Long is somebody to look out for. Ian Strong, another guy on the outside. But they've had 3 tight ends kind of rotating, but former defensive end Kenny Fletcher is the one that's had the most contribution. 5 catches for 40 yards, but 2 touchdowns so far this year, as I think worth pointing at as far as the tight end rooms go.
And their tight ends are pretty good blockers too, as you might expect.
I don't know if he'll play, but Gunnison Bloodgood, wide receiver. What a name! That sounds like it's like the Untouchables or something, or the what's that terrible movie with all the famous stars like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger? Expendables. That's the one.
There you go.
Gunnison Youngblood or Gunnison Bloodgood. That's a great name.
It is.
As always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. As our presenting sponsor, First Bank and Trust Company's support has been invaluable to TSL, helping us to bring you all the great content across all of our platforms. They offer a variety of checking and savings account options that are sure to meet your banking needs. That includes free checking. So visit firstbank.com to find the account that's right for you. All right, let's talk about this defense a little bit on the other side for Rutgers. They've been missing two huge defensive starters to this point. Linebacker Mohamed Toure, torn ACL in the preseason. We've mentioned that in previous podcasts. He was the Big Ten Comeback Player of the Year last season. He earned honorable mention all-conference in the Big Ten last year. He's a team captain. They're without him. And then another linebacker, Tareem Powell. So they're starting to get thin in the middle of their defense there. Former Virginia Tech commit. Suffered a season-ending injury last year in their 8th game of the season against Indiana. It was said originally that he might be ready for this year, but we've yet to see him at this point.
Yet to see him. And if you do see him this weekend, he's going to be a guy who probably didn't get a full preseason in and who hasn't played football since week 8 of last year. So I would expect the snaps to be limited in his first game back. And, you know, there could be some rust and things like that.
Played very well last year. Career high 11 tackles against Virginia Tech.
He was actually
it probably meant more to him a little bit coming into that game.
Yeah, what I remember about him is he was committed to Virginia Tech, and then that was the year Rutgers rehired Schiano.
It's the Jersey movement to keep guys home at that point.
And one of the things he demanded to come back was a private helicopter for recruiting. And one of the first things he did is take that private helicopter right into Tyreen Powell's high school. And then he flipped to Rutgers just like that.
I thought you were going to say Tyreen Powell requested the private helicopter. I'm like, man, I didn't know recruits were making those demands back in the day.
Oh, man, that would be a heck of an NIL deal.
Well, they got 4 guys that have been rotating at linebacker. Daryl Jabome, that's an awesome name, by the way. Moses Walker, Timmy Hinspeter, another good name, and then Abram Wright. These guys a little bit more inexperienced, but those are what you're looking at in the middle of the defense.
Yeah, Toure was a very experienced player and a very, very good player, too. These other guys, you know, none of them have played more than 211 career snaps. They've played well this year, but the snaps are very limited. And
against who?
Exactly. So these guys very well might be good players. Jabome, is that how you pronounce it?
I said Jabome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, he did play significant snaps last year in one game against Maryland, and he was awesome. He had a fantastic game, like 11 tackles and a tackle for loss, and that was his first real playing time. But overall, this group is inexperienced. They may be really good for all we know, but they also may be, you know, a couple of steps behind their regular starters. We don't know because they haven't really been challenged yet in a game this year. So that could be an attackable unit for Virginia Tech. If we're going to break out some misdirection, which, you know, Tech always breaks it out to a certain extent, but if you're going to break it out even more, maybe against this group of inexperienced linebackers, this is a week to try it a bit more.
I think this is the week that they have Colin Schley throw a pass off one of those plays.
Did you know?
I feel like they've been setting that up, giving him like end arounds and stuff like this. It just feels like this is the time to break that out.
Did you know he started the Vanderbilt game? He was on the field the first snap against Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
I did not realize that until I was looking
They've
through
given
the
it to him a sort of
participation
like that sweep thing, and he's run it. I feel like they're trying to set it up for something, though. At least like put it on film, like here's what you have to worry about, but they haven't thrown out of it yet.
Yeah.
One of these weeks coming up, they're going to throw out of that play.
I don't think I'm giving away any state secrets here, but like in one of the preseason practices we were allowed to see, or one of the sessions we were in there for was their trick play session, and, you know, he was throwing a few passes, which you would expect. I mean, so like Rutgers is going to expect it, but like exactly what it's going to look like, where it's going to come from, what's the formation going to be, is it going to be in motion, all that, that's what you don't know.
You know who was the best at those kind of trick play passes? Isaiah Ford. because they'd always give it to him, and he was a lefty.
Right.
So I don't think people expected that he would throw that. Like, he had a really good arm and kind of zipped it. It wasn't just like, you throw it and the thing flips all over the place. It gets to it. Like, it was a tight spiral getting down the field. They went to him a couple times on that play, I thought. So, could be interesting to see what you could do with an actual quarterback in that situation.
And Malachi Thomas, also former high school pitcher, threw a touchdown pass last year. If you actually got him and Schlee into the game at the same time.
Oh, man, who's throwing the ball?
Oh, my gosh.
Those two and drones.
Yeah.
Man, the possibilities are endless.
Yes. Maybe they could actually throw 2 passes in one play. One could throw it across the field to the other.
Before you run here. Come on now.
I think we got to encourage Rutgers SID office to throw. Virginia Tech just put a feature in this year where you can click on a little ear emblem for every Virginia Tech player, and they have a recording of them pronouncing their name, which is awesome.
Some of them were a little unnecessary, like John Love.
Fair.
You're like, John, we needed this for the pronunciation guy. He's like, are you kidding me? Like, it's pretty basic.
Yeah, as the roster card guy, I see a lot of that. And you're right, it's not on every website. But I'm sitting here looking at Rutgers roster, and you're right, they don't have it.
This is the first year Virginia Tech has had it. I know that that was a big deal for the SID office.
You just want to hear somebody say Fitzroy Legister.
I do, and I was just about to say it myself just to make sure somebody did. But that's my favorite name of the week.
Well, we got another interesting name here. Defensive coordinator Joe Harasimiak. I hope I pronounced it right. I tried to look up a couple of these pronunciations. I did look up the highlights of their quarterback to make sure that I was saying that one right. But hard to find an interview one-on-one with the DC. This is his 3rd season at Rutgers. Before, he was the co-defensive coordinator at Minnesota. He was also the head coach at Maine. Went to the FCS semifinals. So not a ton of experience. He's 38 years old, but he's done it at a high level.
Yeah, he was named head coach at Maine when he was like 31 years old, and I think he was the youngest head coach in the country. And in his last year there, they went 10-4, finished number 4 in the country. He was a candidate for the JMU head coaching job this past year. So this guy, he's got a darn good resume for a 38-year-old. So he doesn't quite have the experience as some of the guys on their offensive staff in theory, but he's had a lot of responsibility placed on him as a very young coach, and he's answered the bell every single time. So I think he's a guy who is going to be a head coach at some point in the future. Just don't know where yet.
They were in a dogfight at one point with Ohio State. Scarlet Knights had a 9-7 lead at halftime against the Buckeyes. That was last year. Held Ohio State to just 328 yards that day. Overall, Rutgers has had games where they've held opponents to under 300 yards 5 times last year, and then 10 opponents to under 30 points last year. So they were pretty solid defensively.
Yeah, and you got to think about the two of the 3 teams that scored 30 on them were Michigan, who won the national title, and Ohio State, which scored 35, but one of those was a defensive touchdown. And then randomly Maryland dropped 42 on them, but everybody plays one bad game every year, right? So yeah, this is a defense that is just, it doesn't necessarily have stars. Like you don't look over there and look, I don't see it necessarily a Antoine Powell-Ryland on their defense, like somebody who can just take over a game
wrecker.
Right? But they are solid across the board.
You mentioned Michigan. Do you see who's starting for Michigan at quarterback this week?
I did see that.
Alex Orji, former Virginia Tech commit. So that'll be interesting just to watch.
They've been struggling a bit.
Indeed, they have. Eric Rogers is a corner. Robert Longerbeam, that's another great name on this Rutgers team.
It's a good one.
Shaquan Loyal, Aaron Lewis. So you got 2 corners, a safety, DN. Those are kind of some guys that draw some more attention on the defense. Anything specifically, we should be on the lookout there.
I would say, those 2 corners are very, very good. Eric Rogers' opponents were only 9 of 23 against him last year. That's not quite Dorian Strong level percentage, but it's still pretty darn good. Longer beam opponents for his career are under 50%, and he's played over 1,600 snaps. So that's a very good sample size. So Virginia Tech went after Rogers twice last year and gained 4 yards. They went after Longer Beam 5 times last year and gained 25 yards. So that's the success Virginia Tech had going after Rutgers corners last year. They had more success against the safeties. So that'll be interesting to see how that one plays out this week.
To be fair, DeQuan Felton dropped a pass.
He did.
That
He sure
the
did.
Drones put right on the money. They went and scored on that drive anyway, but I mean, that was one that was going to be a 60, 70-yard touchdown, whatever it was.
How about this? Robert Longerbeam. He's an in-state guy from Virginia, so this might mean a little something to him. Alexandria, Virginia native. He also went to T.C. Williams High School, which is the Remember the Titans High School.
Good research.
So that was interesting there. Any weaknesses on this Rutgers defense? Because everybody's got their seams. It seemed like Greg Schiano was on record saying that he'd like to see a little bit more out of the pass rush.
Yeah, they don't get to the quarterback a whole lot. At least they haven't so far this year. I would say their defensive line, Aaron Lewis is a good defensive end. I would say more so the defensive line is solid. There's not like, I don't think they have anybody as good as Antoine Powell-Ryland. I don't think they have anybody as good as Aeneas Peoples. But, they're a solid, well-coached team. They're not going to make too many mistakes. But if you put inexperienced linebackers behind them, I do think Virginia Tech has an opportunity to score more against Rutgers than they did last year. I think they're going to be well coached. They're going to be sound, but there might be some personnel issues there that Virginia Tech could exploit.
Moving on to the special teams here. Place kicker, Jai Patel. He's pretty decent, 16-19 so far in his career, a long of 51. We don't really know what to expect out of the return game just because of a lack of experience there. Christian Demmel, in all likelihood, is going to take the punts. He has just 4 career punt returns. And then Ben Black, a true freshman, 2 returns so far this year at the kick returner spot. That's kind of what you're looking at there, but no game-breaking ability like Jalen Lane. It seems like Tech has the upper hand in that category.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if there's a punt return for a touchdown or a kickoff return for a touchdown in this game, it would seem more likely to come from Virginia Tech. But, as far as special teams can turn on a big return, special teams can turn a game on a big return, but they can also turn a game on like a mistake, as we've seen so far this year. But generally speaking, I know Tech has made a few mistakes on special teams this year, but this is a team. Virginia Tech was 11th in FEI special teams efficiency last year. Rutgers was 9th. So these are 2 well-coached special teams. If either one of them can gain an advantage and generate a big play, that could be the difference in what seems like it's going to be a close game. I know we say that every week.
Yeah, but you look at Tech special teams so far, and I know they've had the big play with Jalen Lane and a couple nice returns there. They've also, given up 13 points, basically. The double number thing led to a field goal that wouldn't have happened otherwise. The block punt led to a touchdown. The blocked field goal last week, which cost me the bye 7-point first half lead. Not that I'm angry about it, but that's 1 per week. They got to tighten that up. You can't have that when these games start to get close. Like we've mentioned, we think this one might be, and it's just too many per week. I mean, that's a unit that has to be solid across the front. You can't have a gaff like that.
It's always fun when there's a familiar foe in town, and I enjoy these games where, whether it's West Virginia and you're playing kind of an old school game, or when they meet up with Syracuse or Rutgers or whatever it may be, those calls back to the Big East, because that's what I grew up with, was Big East football. Any fond memories of playing Rutgers over the years with this matchup? Or bad memories?
This is actually before my time as a Tech fan, but Will, you can talk about the 92 game.
Yeah, let's see if I can remember the details. Everybody who saw it, there were some Tech fans there. The game was at Rutgers. The Hokies led big in that game. And sorry, if I'd known this was coming, I would have looked the box score up. But what that game came down to was Virginia Tech led by a point, I believe. Honestly, folks, I don't really tell you what. Let's put a pin in that and come back to me.
Okay, sure. Okay, sounds good. I remember my dad taking me to the 98 Rutgers game, and there were about 42,000 people in the stands in Lane Stadium, because that was when Tech didn't sell out and it was before the stadium expansion, so crowds in the 40,000s were very common. That was the last game before the sellout streak in Lane Stadium began, and it lasted from the UVA game in 98 all the way up through 2012. So I was at that Rutgers game. For the most part, though, my memory of Rutgers is just a bunch of blowouts.
Well, I didn't cover any Rutgers games back in the day. My buddy Nathan Waters did when he was a student here, and then covered the team after that. But I think he told me when he was up there in the press box at Rutgers, I forget what year it was, but you know how they would people would call in and give updates. And it's people would always be calling in and Rutgers football, 7-0, and then a couple minutes later, it's Rutgers football, yes, 21-0, 21-0, and the score just went up like
progressively.
that, just over and over like that. I'd never been to Rutgers until last year. I thought the game day atmosphere up there was great. Mm-hmm. They had like this cool thing outside, like all these food trucks lined up on the street, which I guess they didn't do all the time. I think that was like a special thing they did that week. They should do it all the time. I thought it was fantastic. The atmosphere up there, I thought the game day atmosphere, they have like that big train horn that goes on during the game. Afterwards, they had the Sopranos song. As you're walking up the tunnel to go to like the thing, it's like this light show in the thing with the Sopranos song going. It's like, that's awesome. If I was a Jersey school like that, I would lean into Bruce Springsteen and the Sopranos all the time. They do a great job with it. I thought it was a fun game.
I thought it was a very fun place to see a game, and it got rowdy in there. Like the students, it was loud. It was a good atmosphere, and the horn helped out. I was impressed, I would say, with the atmosphere last year.
What I remember about their atmosphere was the '97 game when Tech won by like 40 or 50, and they used to have like a Revolutionary War reenactment group with a cannon on the hill outside their stadium, and they would shoot off the cannon every time Rutgers scored, and they didn't shoot off the cannon. But when they finally shot off the cannon that day, the ESPN camera panned to them, and they were like, man, these guys have been sitting here doing nothing for 3 quarters, and they finally get to shoot off their cannon.
Didn't they have that last? I think they had those guys last year.
Okay.
Yep.
Those uniforms have to be so hot.
For that time of year, absolutely.
That game was just brutally hot out there, too. It's like, man, they're sitting in the sun. It's like
the '97 game was in August, and they were out there in those uniforms.
Man.
Yeah.
There you go. What you got, Will?
All right, so the 1992 game, and this was emblematic of Virginia Tech's 1992 season. The Hokies went 2-8-1 that year. And I believe the statistic is that if football games were 55 minutes long, Virginia Tech would have gone 7-4. They lost a lot of leads late. And in this particular game against Rutgers, Tech led 28-7 towards the end of the first quarter. Coughed up a 66-yard touchdown run to make it 28-13, and that's when things started going back and forth. The Hokies led 49-44 very late in the game. Rutgers had a 3rd and 7 at their own 39 with 2nd and 7 from their own 39 with 14 seconds left in the game. They got to score a touchdown. They're 61 yards away. They proceed to complete a 46-yard pass. I'm pretty sure that this was, let's see. So 46-yard pass down to the Tech 15. Ran down the field. They had no timeouts. Remember, this started with 14 seconds left. They run down the field, no timeouts. They spike the ball, run a play from the 15-yard line, throw it to the corner of the end zone, touchdown as time expires.
So they went 61 yards in 14 seconds with no timeouts.
In two plays.
It's kind of like the Falcons on Monday night against the Eagles. Just zipped down the field, scored there. That was basically a walk-off win, right? I think it was a walk-off win. I think that there's no time left when they caught that pass.
So that made it 50-49, and that was it. And
that's wild.
That is for those that saw it and lived through it. That is quite the painful memory.
That was pretty much the nail in the coffin for that version of the Frank Beamer staff. And it was after that season that he made the coaching changes that went on to propel him to be a Hall of Famer.
Wild. Any other memories of Tech Rutgers before we get into a little bit more analysis and let everybody go?
They were so bad.
Everybody tries to block out that Russell Athletic Bowl.
Oh God, I forgot about that.
See, you've blocked it. You've blocked it out of your memory.
It was the worst I'm not going to say it's the worst offensive football I've ever seen because I've seen a lot of bad offensive football.
That was
bad.
That was a worse game than the 0-0 double overtime game.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Offensively, I think like everything about it. 2 cool helmets in that game. It was like the matte Gobbler helmet, and then Rutgers had like these shiny silver ones. Horrible weather game, a horribly played game. Like Tech snapped it into the end zone for a safety or a touchdown for the other team on like the second play of the game, and ran for like 3 yards in the game. It was unbelievable. Andy? I mean, it was a bowl record number of punts. I think it was like 20 something.
See, now you got me scrambling to look stuff up.
It was a horrible game. Then afterwards, we're sitting there in the post game. We basically have to ask Frank, like, are you going to fire your entire coaching staff? And it's like, that was such a weird game.
So that after that 1992 game, that built up some pretty bad karma. Tech won the next 12 games in a row, including that Russell Athletic Bowl before Rutgers finally won last year.
Yeah, Tech leads the all-time series 12 games to Rutgers 4, and the Hokies are undefeated 6-0 when playing in Blacksburg against Rutgers. All right, if Virginia Tech is to win this thing on Saturday, they did what? We'll start with Andy.
Slow down the run. I don't think you're going to stop it. I think you need to put impediments in the way, though. They can't be ripping off 60-yard touchdown runs. That might tell the tale. Does Rutgers have a 40-yard touchdown run? If they do, they probably win this game. If they don't and they have to churn out these 10, 12, 15 play drives, I think Tech's got a chance.
They pretty much took the words right out of my mouth. I think if you look back, if Virginia Tech wins this game, you'll probably look back at the box score and say Rutgers threw it between 25 and 30 times. Virginia Tech forced Rutgers to throw the ball a little more than they wanted to because they were able to limit the running game. Like, you're not going to. I think if you just look at the stats in this game, it's hard for me to envision this Virginia Tech defense right now shutting down any running game, much less this one. But you've got to improve to the point from week to week where you can limit it. And if you can put them in enough long yardage situations, they got to throw the ball more than they're comfortable with. That's a situation where I see Virginia Tech walking out with a win.
What you think, Will?
Yeah, I think one thing to add to that is I think that we all believe that there will be a couple of big plays by Rutgers. It's going to be difficult to hold them probably below 20 points. And if you look at last year's game, the way it played out, that puts the pressure on Virginia Tech to not make mistakes, do not turn the ball over. Rutgers didn't turn it over last year. I think they only turned it over 13 times all of last season. They are not a team that turns the ball over. So you just can't make those kind of mistakes. And you got to be careful with the penalties because Tech had a play last year where Tootin caught a 28-yard pass from drones, and there was something like a holding on the play or something like that brought it back. It makes it playing against a team like Rutgers magnifies your mistakes, so you have to greatly limit your mistakes.
Let's predict this thing, shall we? We'll start with Chris.
I'm a little bit jealous of Rutgers because they have the mentality and the physicality that I want in Virginia Tech's program. So, and I think Virginia Tech has superior talent at quarterback and wide receiver. If they could combine some of the discipline that Rutgers possesses and the physicality, I think this team is capable of winning a lot of games. This is a measuring stick game, and we've talked about this all offseason. Rutgers, their style of play, their strengths, it was Virginia Tech's kryptonite last year, absolute kryptonite. How much has this Virginia Tech team improved? Have they improved? We don't. I think they have. I'm inclined to say they have, but we don't know it for a fact yet. We will find out this week, and that's what I've maintained the whole offseason. Vandy wasn't supposed to happen, but I still believe that this game will tell us a lot, maybe more than any other game early in the season, what Virginia Tech is this year.
I went with Virginia.
I forgot to give my prediction.
You got to predict.
I think I picked it Rutgers 27, Virginia Tech 23.
Yes, that's what you got.
27-23 Rutgers. All right, what you got, Andy?
I went with Virginia Tech in this one. I said 23-19. I think it's going to be sort of a rock fight type game. And maybe Virginia Tech is not the better equipped team to win that game, but I don't know. I sense the negativity on the site swinging too far one way based on where these teams are, just based on Rutgers hasn't really played anybody so far. Virginia Tech has struggled early in the season, but they've also played in some games where they actually had to, tighten up and play better to come out on the winning end of those. So I thought that Virginia Tech was going to win this before the season. The line still is in Virginia Tech's favor. So I kind of zagged a little bit from where I thought the fans were going on this one. So certainly in buy or sell coming up, and I'm picking the Hokies to win it.
Well, let's hope that bitter nose ball. What you got, Will?
Other than delicious Kool-Aid, I'm taking a leap of faith here. Virginia Tech to win a one-score game. Chris, you had a stat in the preview. Tell me if you remember this. Rutgers held 10 of their opponents last year to under 30 points.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's difficult to score more than 30 points on them. And these are basically the same two teams as last year. So that's one thing that's interesting about this matchup.
Yeah, that's one thing I forgot to mention. Virginia Tech was, I think, 4th in the country in returning production from last year's team. Rutgers was 12th. So this is going to be a game of a bunch of juniors and seniors playing against each other. There's going to be very few players on the field this week with limited experience.
So I picked the Hokies 27-24, and that's a leap of faith that they'll win a one-score game. The stats out there that Tech is 1-8 in one-score games under Brent Pry. So, Gio, are you going to do David and Nick's picks?
Yeah, I can do that, unless you want to do it.
No, go ahead and then come back to me, and I'll tell you what the fans are picking so far.
Okay, sounds good. Nick's got this one, Rutgers winning it 24-20. David has it, Rutgers 35-27. And what do the fans have, Will?
In the early voting, there's 182 votes in. We usually get about 2,000 of these. 40% say Rutgers wins a close one by 1-10. 35% say the Hokies win a close one. The total Hokies predictions for victory are 40%. So, you got 4 out of 10 at this point. And I don't think those numbers are going to change a whole lot as the number of entries go up.
It is a bit of a leap of faith to say Virginia Tech's going to win a close game because they're only 1-8 in close games under Pry. But at the same time, it has to happen at some point. It's got to happen at some point. Yeah. But it's like, for me, when I pick games, it's like, okay, if it hasn't happened,
it's not gonna.
Oh, yeah, it's not a bet I'd make in Vegas. Then right, I'm not gonna pick it. But you want this game to be close. Like, obviously hope Virginia Tech wins, and I hope Virginia Tech doesn't go out there and blow their doors off and beat them by 3 or 4 touchdowns. I hope they beat them in a close game because Virginia Tech has to learn how to win close games at some point, and you learn by doing. So the more close games you're in, the better chance you have to learn.
I have them doing that. My final score, I picked the lowest scoring game out of any of us. I have Virginia Tech winning it in a rock fight, to Andy's point, 20-17 is what I'm going with. I think, too, when both teams' strength is running the ball, that just makes the clock go, and that just alludes to a lower scoring game. There's not going to be as many possessions and opportunities to put points on the board. I see some action for the field goal kickers, for sure. And it looks like we're completely split. 3 of us said Tech wins a one-possession game. 3 of us said Tech loses a one-possession game.
Yeah, we are. If you're keeping track, that is Chris, David, and Nick picking Rutgers, and Will and Andy amongst the full-time staff, and then you picking Virginia Tech.
There we go. What's coming up on TechSideline.com this weekend?
I'll have an Inside the Numbers later this afternoon. Friday Q&A tomorrow. Typical week here on out. Next week, it'll be a little bit different because the Miami game is on a Friday, so we'll have to move around our scheduling a little bit.
I'll have something on the offense. We talked to Tyler Bowen yesterday, just sort of where they are with that, how he's feeling about that operation. Hopefully get some more details on this Metallica thing here. We're efforting to do that right now, but we'll see if that takes place.
I wonder how much it would cost to get Lars on the podcast.
That'd be crazy.
That'd be pretty cool. Might be out of our price range.
Probably millions of dollars. Anyways, thank you to our presenting sponsor, First Bank and Trust Company. Of course, go ahead and check out the Tech Sideline poster store live on our website as well. For Nick Brown behind the scenes, for Will Stewart, for Andy Bitter, for Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long, and we'll see you next week. Let's get a win on Saturday.